Welcome. My name is James Boland, and I'm the founder and president of the Australian Community. The Australian Community is a US public charity, and its mission is to connect Australians living in the US through social, professional, and charitable initiatives. We are speaking tonight with Zjantelle Cammisa Markel, who is the principal of Cammisa Markel, a New York law firm specializing in immigration. Welcome, Zjantelle.
Hi, James. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Perhaps for someone who may be watching one of these updates for the first time, you could speak a little about your firm and the work you do, not just for Australians.
Yeah, sure, James. So I am a US immigration attorney. I have been practicing for 20 years. I've had my practice since 2003, so about 17 years. We predominantly practice business immigration and some family immigration. So our practice doesn't really concentrate on asylum or deportation cases, but more the business and work visas and green cards, and or green cards through marriage to US citizens or for parents of US citizens and for children. But predominantly the work-based visas. And we do all nationalities. We have a large Australian client base, just given our background, my background. And so we do a lot of E3s, but we do a lot of L's, H's, O's, P's, J's, every nationality. We have a lot of Brazilian, British, French, Italian, every nationality, Venezuelan, lots of different clients.
This afternoon, we saw the administration release details of the Presidential Proclamation regarding the entry of non-immigrant visa holders into the US. The ink is barely dry, but what are your first impressions?
Yeah, James, I'll give sort of a high-level overview of the proclamation and try and keep it concise. So there's a couple of things. First thing is that this proclamation extends the proclamation that was made on April 22nd, and it has extended that proclamation through till December 31st. So if you recall, that was suspending the issuance of green cards from outside the US. So it suspended the issuance of green cards to DV lottery winners. That was a big one. Spouses and children of green card holders, parents of US citizens, and employment-based green cards that are from outside the US as well. It did not apply to green cards for spouses and children of US citizens. So a point to make with respect to that proclamation, and which continues through till December, is that it doesn't affect the issuance of green cards or permanent residency to those people who are applying from within the US. What we will see as an effect, though, is that the ones that are being applied for from within the US will take longer. And the reason for that is that during COVID-19 and while everything was closed, all the USCIS offices were also closed. And they're only just starting to resume scheduling interviews for those. However, they have said that they're not going to schedule as many interviews in a day as what they did. And also the New York City district office is still not open. So given that, we can expect that the issuance of green cards here from within the US are going to take significantly longer than ever before. So let's get to the meat of what people really want to hear about, and that is the visa categories that are now being targeted under this executive order. So the categories that are affected, James, are the H-1B visa, the H-2B visa, the J-1, and the L-1. I'll just go to the J1 because the subcategories that are affected under the J1 are the student work travel J1, which a lot of Aussies and Kiwis do come over on, the intern J1 and the trainee J1. So we have a lot of Aussies and Kiwis that come over on that as well. Teacher J1, camp counsellor J1, and the au pair J1. So those are all affected. There are J1s that are reserved for researchers and for scholars and for exchange students. Those are not affected. So that's important to know. The other thing that is important to know about this proclamation is that it only applies to people who do not have a valid one of these visas now, and they're outside the US. So if you have a valid H-1B or L or J, and you're outside the US, you can come back in on those. It's just if you're outside the US and you don't have one yet, the consulates will not be issuing those visas until at least December 31st, which is when this proclamation goes until. It can be extended, but right now it's till December 31st. There are the proclamation also applies to the dependents of those visa categories, so spouses and children. What I think is important to note are the exemptions. Again, the exemptions to this are if you have a green card, well, of course, it doesn't affect you if you have a green card because you're not going to have an H or an L and a green card at the same time. Again, it doesn't affect the spouse or child of a US citizen. It doesn't affect any aliens seeking to enter the United States to provide temporary labor or services that are essential to the United States food supply chain. So if your work is in the food supply chain, you will be granted a visa. And another category that is protected is if they deem that your work is in the nation's interest, in the national interest of the United States. And they've kind of designated what categories those are that they consider to be in the national interest. And those are if your work is related to the defense, law enforcement, diplomacy, or national security of the United States, or if your work is involved in the provision of medical care to COVID patients, or in research for COVID-19, then your work, if you will be able to get a visa if your work is related to that. An interesting exemption that they've made is anyone whose work is necessary to facilitate the immediate and continued economic recovery of the United States. I thought that clause was really interesting because in my mind, there might be some L executives whose work we might be able to argue their work is necessary to the immediate and continued economic recovery of the United States if their jobs are to come here and hire, in their business plan, hire multiple Americans for their work. So it'll be interesting to see how and if any of us are able to apply that exception and get any visas approved at consulates abroad under that exception. I think the other important part of the proclamation to consider is Section 5, additional measures. So under that section, they talk about how the EB2 and EB3 green card categories. So we were expecting that this was going to come up. You might recall in some of our other webinars, James, we talked about how green cards might become difficult to obtain because categories such as the EB2 and EB3, which are subject to this proclamation, require the employer to go through a recruitment process and show that they couldn't find American or green card holders to fill the position that they're trying to sponsor the person for a green card for. So I think, they've said under this proclamation that those categories are going to come under scrutiny because they're going to doubt that the employers couldn't find an American or permanent resident. So if anyone trying to get a green card under the PERM process for EB2 and EB3, that might become a little bit more difficult now. Another interesting section of the proclamation is under Section 5, C1, is that they've said that anyone being issued a visa will have to have their biometrics taken, fingerprints, signatures, and photo. That's already in place, so that's nothing new. Anyone going to get a visa at a consulate board does go through that process. They're just reiterating it here. In fact, when you look at this, a lot of what's being said is already in place because the consulates aren't open. People aren't getting issued H1Bs or Ls or Js at the moment anyway. What this is clarifying is that it will be until the end of the year. We were hoping, especially for new H1Bs that get them issued around October 1, those people are going to now need to wait until December 31st or the new year, basically, unless they're already in the US. So if you're already in the US, it will not affect you again for any of those categories. One thing I did want to bring up, so I will clarify right now that, if you're on an E3, an O1, P1, H3, if you're applying for a B, E1, E2, F for students, or OPT, we thought OPT might be targeted, you're okay right now. This executive order does not affect you. But there is a section in this executive order that could affect all visa categories. And that I wanted to bring people's attention to is section 5C2, which says that they're going to take appropriate steps for, consistent with applicable law, to prevent certain aliens who have final orders of removal, so that's if they're in deportation proceedings, who are inadmissible or deportable, from the United States, or, and this is the important part, who have been arrested for, charged with, or convicted of a criminal offence in the United States from obtaining eligibility to work in the United States. So where that provision is quite alarming to me is that if you've just been arrested in the United States or charged for a crime in the United States, and because it says or convicted, so it's not saying if you are arrested, charged and convicted, it's or. So even just being arrested for a crime in the United States could prevent you from being able to get a visa. So I think any of our listeners that are going to leave the US right now to try and process a visa, I think caution should be taken if they've ever been arrested, charged or convicted of a crime in the US. Even if they've been issued a visa after that has happened before, I think this is something that they really should take precaution with, and maybe those people should consider renewing their visas from within the US and not leaving right now. So those were the things that I really wanted to cover, and that were the most important things. Again, this is in effect until the end of the year. James, I think that what's important is for anyone who needs to renew a visa, particularly if you need to renew an H1B, an H2B, or a J or an L, you don't want to be leaving the US to do that right now. That should all be done from within the US. And if you're in any of the other visa categories, then certainly just make sure you're under the guidance of your immigration attorney, who can assess whether leaving and getting the visa abroad is appropriate for you. But the other visa categories should be okay. Just the H's, L's, J's, stay here. But again, if you're on an E3, you're fine. O1s are great. P's, H3s, I visas, which are journalists, the B, E1, E2, F1 and OPT are all good right now, James.
Well, thank you, Zjantelle. As always, this information is highly valuable. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I know you're incredibly busy. I know you've got to get on a bunch of emails after this, but we're going to get this up on the web as quickly as possible. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel so you can receive notifications when we post new updates. Or if you're on Facebook, please like our page. Thank you again, Zjantelle. We appreciate these updates. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome, James.
You have a great night.